Good afternoon, students. Welcome to the second live interaction session for programming in C++. We are almost at the end of the course, and certainly I am sure you have made quite a bit of progress. Some of you have been sending difficulties to me also, and there have been questions on the forum. So, in this interaction session, we had received some questions. So, I will first work through them, and then I will address the questions that have been that will come during the session. Before I start addressing those, I must tell you that I will primarily address questions which are to the point, which there are some questions which are very generic, like explain it again and kind of. So, for those I will refer to go to the video, and also there are questions which does not relate to the academic part of the course. So, those will have to go to the NPTEL office, NPTEL secretariat. Okay. So, let us get started. Let us look at the first question, which is from Amarnath Para. What is the use of clone function in C++ while we have copy constructor in C++? As such, there is no separate dedicated clone function, there is no clone method as such. Copy constructor has a specific purpose. So, it gets invoked whenever we try to make any copy, particularly when you are trying to pass an object by value to a function, or we try to initialize an object from an existing object. So, it gets copy constructor gets called, and the copy constructor functionally should clone an object. So, cloning is more a concept in the object oriented paradigm, where you want to specify that okay, I have an object and I want another object which is kind of clone for it. So, copy constructor is a given built-in mechanism for that. So, we often call this process as the process of cloning. Well, you can there is no separate built-in clone function in C++. You can write your different cloning algorithms and strategies separately if you would want. For example, when you do a copy construction, it constructs the object in a default space of wherever that the original object is in, could be on the stack most often. But if you want to control that, you could write specific clone functions for doing that, and but as such it is more a functionality than a specific method in C++. Friend class and inheritance, the question is from Tejash. If we declare a particular class as a friend of another class is one case, the other case is we inherit one class from another. What will be the major difference between the two cases if we can acquire and access properties by declaring a class as a friend? Well, you will have to Tejash, I am sure you will have to go back to the videos, the lectures, where both these concepts are discussed, because they are significantly different in terms of this. Actually, if I may compare, then inheritance is significantly a core concept of object oriented design, where we are saying that it is object oriented modeling is about having a hierarchy of specialization. So, we have a very generic object at the root which has the kind of the minimal properties, and then I inherit from that, specialize from that, build more and more classes with for objects which have more specific properties. So, I can have say a transportation device to be a root class, which say that these talk about devices which help people, or object or material to be transported from one place to the other. Then we can specialize based on the medium used in transportation, whether it is air, whether it is water, or it is land, and then we can specify further in each one of these whether if it is by land, then whether it is walking, whether it is cycling, or whether it is automated vehicle, 4-wheeler, 2-wheeler. So, these kind of representation is the core of the inheritance system, and which is very required for object oriented modeling. So, when you do that, what the core property that you have is not of access. The core property that you have is of inheriting from the parent. So, you inherit a object layout which exists in the parent, you can add on more data members to that, and you inherit the methods of the parent. And then you have mechanisms to override. You can override the behavior of a particular method that the parent has, and have your own methods, and you keep on doing that. Naturally, when you do this, then it becomes important as to, so you have one class and another class which is the inherited, the derived class. It becomes important as to what are the privacy or access rules. So, parent might want that its details may not even be available to the child class, the inherited class. So, it will put it in private. The parent may want its implementation, the data members could completely be public, that is everybody can see that. But in between, the parent may want that it wants something which is between within the hierarchy, not specifically for the parent, but and not for the public. So, then it is applicable to the hierarchy. So, you put protected access types, and through these you can. So, that is why you have 3 different gradations and you do this. So, that is what is the whole concept of inheritance and the access that you need for inheritance. So, a child class can inherits everything from the parent, can have access only to the protected and public members, whether it is data member or it is methods, and it cannot actually directly access the private data members of the parent, because that is how you can create a very 3-layered access property for the whole hierarchical modeling, which is typical of object oriented systems. In contrast, friend is more a violation of the object oriented system. So, inheritance is what is the core of it, whereas friends is more a violation, where you are saying, well, when there are situations where it gets very difficult to model things in a purely object oriented manner. So, you have 2 classes and one needs to use the private data members or protected data members, or private methods, protected methods of another class. Then you create a friendship, and when you create that friendship, you are actually violating the encapsulation, because you are letting someone else who is not related to you. In inheritance, the class is related. That's the core important part to remember, that is you are specializing. So, the classes are related. You do friendship between classes that are not related, you are just giving an access permission to them. So, you are violating the encapsulation. There is no gradation in terms of friendship. If you do a friendship, then all of your public as it is was visible, but all of your protected and private members equally become visible to your friend class. It is also that then comes a different semantics of the friend, whether the friendship is one way. So, A is a friend of B does not mean that B is a friend of A. It is not transitive. A is a friend of B, B is a friend of C does not imply that A is a friend of C, and so on. So, it is used for a very different. So, friendship should be used in a very limited understood manner, only for making certain programming exercise or modeling exercise easy in the context of the language, whereas inheritance is the core of the language, is the core of the object oriented model and implementation, which should be most widely used. So, if you go back with this input, if you go back to the respective lectures where you have discussed the inheritance and where you have discussed the friendship in detail, also talking about these pros and cons of these mechanisms, then I think you will get a better clarity. Okay, command line argument. Command line argument actually is a feature that came to C++ from C. So, it is a same feature. So, when you have now for the whole of this a C++ or C program, your starting point is main, and main calls a function. So, main can pass a parameter to a function, and then any function calls another function can pass a parameter. So, the question is, what if I want to give an input to main, that is when I start the program, at that time if I want to give some inputs. So, command line, now naturally since main is the beginning of the story and no function, at least no function that you know or that you write is calling main. Main of course is again in turn gets called, but that gets called by a system implemented function. So, in such case, what do you do if you want to put an input to main? So, you write it down in the command line. So, you typically write the program execution executable as the first one, and in most systems if you just write and proceed, then the program gets started, main starts. So, along with that you can put a set of different parameters along that, and since it is outside of the programming system, you do not know what those parameters could be of type and so on. So, you assume that every parameter is a string, it is a character string, and then you separate them by blank. So, for this main has this mechanism, as you can see here, is main has the mechanism that it takes one parameter which is argc, which tells you how many command line arguments you have written, and then you have an array of strings. Cat star is a string that is pointed to a string, a pointer, character pointer. So, it is a string, and argv is a flexible array. So, as many parameters as you have given, that becomes the value of the argc plus 1, there will be one more. The reason is the program name will also be mentioned, and then you can go in main, you can check how many arguments you have. Argc, if say argc is 3, then you will have 3 parameters, of which the first one or the 0th one, argv0, which we are showing here, holds the name of the program, the name of the executable, and then there will be 2 argv1 and argv2, which will also be valid because you have 3 parameters, and those will come in the form of string. You can take that, and of course, if you wanted to give a number, then you will just write down suppose you wanted to give an input 35, then you will write 35. So, it will come as a string 35, then you will have to convert that into the number 35. If you want to give a name, you will have to give that as a character string and so on. So, command line parameters are very important for actually communicating the inputs to the program. Right, let us move on. Database connection, how to link C++ program with database. There are several mechanisms, but Simranjit is asking the question. Simranjit, I must say that C++ language by itself does not give mechanisms to connect to database. There is no such mechanism in this. What you get is you can create a library. So, the database implementers, whether it is say I am assuming, let us say if it is a relational database, if it is something like MySQL or Oracle or Sybase, that will give a library where there will be functions which you can call from C++. There are other mechanisms also. There are mechanisms of embedding certain SQL code within your C++, even if you forget about that, but the library of database connection provided by the database implementer will actually give you all those details. So, it depends on which library you are using. So, there may be some library which give you a connection class object. So, that is some third party library. So, which will be able to connect to a particular database connection, where you will have to log in, and then you will have to specify which database within the system you want to access, then the specific tables and so on. So, it is something which you will have to use. So, you have mentioned some header files and all that, but it depends specifically on the particular database system that you are going to use. You will have to check the manual for that to see how you can connect to that database from the C++ programs. So, this question came on the forum as a frequently asked question. So, the representative one is from Karan, saying why a pointer of type class A cannot be casted into pointer of void type, whereas the reverse is true. So, let us say what is the meaning of void star or pointer of type. So, if I may draw, let me just try to draw this. So, I have say here I have given int p star. So, basically I have a pointer p, it will point somewhere. Right now it is dangling. So, if I do say something like p assigned new int 4, so it will have a location. So, which is of type, which will contain this value 4, and star p will mean this. So, what I know about this is if I have a pointer here, and if I go to that address, I will necessarily find an integer. Think about the other case where you are saying your pointer is VP, is void star. So, what you are saying is that what it means is you are saying that I have a pointer, that is I have an address here, but I do not know what kind of element is it pointing to. Is it pointing to an integer? Is it pointing to a double, or is it pointing to an object of a class and so on? I do not know that information. So, because void is a no type. So, a pointer, so it is a pointer to a no type. If I do not know that type, then I cannot actually do anything with that. So, what I can do is, if when I am doing VP assigned P, then what I am saying, I am taking this address and copying it here. So, which means this is actually pointing to this. So, what I have is I have a void pointer which is an address which could point to anything. Now, it is pointing to an integer. If I had something like int, let us not say int, let us say double star q new double say 2.3, and then if I do VP assigned q, then VP will in turn point to q, which is 2.3. So, here I do not know what the type is. So, I can put any type into that. But what happens if I try to do this? Then P has a type, P has been told to be a type of integer pointer, and I am assigning to it an address value whose type is not known. So, I do not know what is the meaning of this, there is no meaning. So, if this is allowed, then P will eventually point to something which I do not know what is the type of. So, when I do star P, I expect it to get an integer, but I have assigned q to VP. So, VP is pointing to 2.3. I have allowed, so this is what I am doing, assigned q and P is assigned VP. Let us say if this is correct, then P by my declaration of the type of P should point to an integer, but VP actually is pointing to a double. So, P will point to that double, P will point to this double. So, I have an integer pointer and is pointing to a double. So, when I do star P, I will try to take this location and decode as if it had an integer. So, I will get some garbage result out of that. Please remember that in the actual binary representation, it is not as simple as that 2.3, if you think of it as integer and go there and try to read, you will get 2, you will not. The representations are very different. It is not that you keep 2, then keep a point and then keep a 3, you have a floating point representation. So, from which if you read say 4 bytes of an integer from the beginning, you will get something meaningless, right. So, if this were allowed, then you create a potential for actually having severe errors in the program, which will be almost impossible to debug. So, this is an error. So, because you are losing information here, you would had an information of pointing to integer in P by assigning VP to it, you are actually losing that information. but the program code will continue to think that p still points to an integer. Whereas, here in the other case, when you point p to V p, you are actually you have a much less expectation. You do not expect to know what it is pointing to. It is indeed pointing to an integer. So, you do not have any violation in that. So, in case you want to actually take a void pointer and put it to integer, you will have to do something like this, where you explicitly say that I want to take that void pointer and put it there. I know that though it is of type pointed to void, it is actually at present pointing to an integer. So, treat it like an integer. So, not advisable, but at least in C++ is not at all advisable to do this. We have talked a lot about how to cast, and this is a typical C style cast, and you will find that if you want to do this in C++, you will have to use that violative reinterpret cast, which in the lecture we have mentioned is there, but should not at all be used, because it violates a lot of semantics that are common, right. So, that is kind of the reason of why this happens. I hope this is correct. So, let me go to the, I hope I am in the, yeah. So, which textbook should I refer for C++? I think every session we get this, and this list is provided a couple of times earlier as before. Of course, Strauss-Stroop book is the best, but if you are looking for some simpler text, then you can use these which are given here. The difference between proctored exam and unproctored exam, I think the answer is given here. You can read and understand. The basic conceptually what it means is unproctored is a verified conduction of the exam. So, you come with your identity, proven that, and there is invigilator who is checking that it is you only who is taking the examination, and during the examination you are not taking any other help. Unproctored is a trust based examination mechanism, where we need programming examinations to be done. So, you are doing that, taking that while you sit at home. So, we trust that you are doing it yourself, but if there is someone unscrupulous and kind of takes help from someone else or looks up the net to find the solution, then actually there is no way to figure that out. So, this is how they are used, and our TAs Himadri, Showman, they have given the detailed information on this. So, we can just follow and understand, otherwise we can get back on the fact. How useful the C++ language is as compared to others? Well, this usefulness is a very vague concept, because the usefulness of a language depends significantly on what are you trying to do with the language. Please do not think that the languages, multiple languages exist just because people get a lot of fun by creating the languages, writing the compiler, and no. There are variety of applications, and based on the application that you want to develop, you would like to use the appropriate language, you should use the appropriate language. So, if you are using you are doing more of infrastructure programming, what is meant by infrastructure programming is you are building operating systems, you are writing compilers, you are writing networking protocols, you are writing database systems. Those are infrastructure programs which require a lot of efficiency, lot of maintainability and so on. They are typically very complex code and typically written by relatively more experts. Then you will use a language like C++, and it gives you the complexity as well as extreme efficiency. You will use C also for infrastructure programming in several cases, because it has been historically used, and there are smaller systems like your Android operating system or things like that, which run on smaller devices, where having a language, using a language as complex as C++ becomes too heavy to use. So, use C in that. In contrast, if you are using, if you are intending to write typically application programs, say, let us say in today's time we are talking so much about data science, we are talking so much about machine learning. So, you are solving problems by actually taking a huge volume of data, trying to find out their characteristics and solve that. You are doing a lot of different data classification, annotation, all of that. For that, significantly Python should be used. The reason are simple, is Python has a huge community who builds large number of third party libraries. So, almost in every task, irrespective of the domain you have come from, you may be an aerospace engineer, you may be an agricultural engineer, you may be a chemist, you may be a physicist, you may be a computer scientist, whatever domain you come from, you will find a whole lot of libraries available as developed by the community people, which almost solves the problem that you are intending to solve. So, you have very little code that you will actually have to write, you have proven libraries which can be used. In contrast, then if this is so easy to program in Python, then why do not you use it for infrastructure? Because the ease of Python comes at the cost of efficiency. The same task written in C++ and written in Python has a wide gap in terms of the time and memory it uses. The Python code compared to the C++ might be 10 to 100 times slower, it might take 10 times more memory. But if you are writing an application program where that time is not that critical, where the memory is not that important, you would like to use Python because it is very easy to write, easy to read, it does not need much documentation, the code is forcibly formatted in a way that is easy. So, for application programs you would like to do that. A vehicular language for variety of applications is Java, which is more complex than Python. It can actually, it actually is based on the same object oriented paradigm that C++ is, but it is more focused in terms of writing application programs of variety of transactional. For example, the front ends of database applications, graphics applications, those become very easy to write, GUI based application very easy to write in Java, because it has been designed for that purpose. Java again cannot be used for infrastructure programming, because it is far slow compared to C or C++. Java runs on a virtual machine called JVM, Java Virtual Machine. Interestingly, that machine is written in C++. So every language that you see. So, what I have put in here is there is an organization called TOBI, who every month surveys thousands and thousands of free programming projects and find out what is the volume of code different people are writing in different languages, and they publish a language ranking based on that. The process is far more complex than what I am saying, but they kind of give a feel of what is the popularity of these languages. So, accordingly they are ranked, and you will see that kind of the rating that they provide. Java is at 15%, so it is most popular, followed by C at 12%, Python at 7.5 and C++ at 7.4 and so on. So, if you actually consider that if you are a good C++ programmer, then necessarily you are also a knowledgeable programmer in C, then you will add this together and see that this actually the C++ family covers about 20% of the code that is being written today, and that happens to be the highest for a single language family. So, it is useful, you must learn. Career. I am a first year student in a tier 3 engineering college, and there are no job placements here. Future looks very dark here. I wish to do internship in future, but my college does not support that. I am ready to work hard in C++ programming. Please guide me. I have very big dreams. Rishikesh Joshi, really we are with you in your dreams, but certainly there is no shortcut to that. You should do a lot of extensive programming in C++. There are several free study material, assignments, online tests, validations available on C++. So, you should you do a lot of programming practice. So, main motto in this whole thing is practice, and it totally depends on your practice how quickly you will become, how well equipped in C++ programming, and you become a valuable resource and the lack of internship showstoppers. You can still become very good C++ programmer through practice. Others question, city in which I live, that is Pune, has closed all educational institutions till 31st March due to COVID-19. Yes, we all are affected. I mean, the whole of India, the whole of world is affected so much. So, for the final exam, can you make online give exam at the house? No, obviously proctored exams cannot happen at your home. So, it will happen at the centers only, but I think the notifications have already gone, and the date for the proctored examination, I mean the current date has been cancelled and new date will be announced as soon as the situation improves. So, please keep in touch Vignesh in terms of NPTEL announcements, and you will soon, I mean of course, I mean everybody is waiting for this high of the virus to go down, so that we can come back to normalcy, and then the test will happen there. Now, we decided not to stall the progression of the course, because the course has no contact component. Everything is on a distance. So, you are downloading videos, studying it yourself, and we are having live sessions. So, there is no COVID risk in this. So, the course will continue according to the 8 weeks that we have. The assignments will continue, because these are all online and has no contact component, but the proctored examination, in fact, we will also schedule the unproctored examination on a certain date, but the proctored examination will take some more time to be announced on a fresh date. Use of C++, Reshmitha, I think I have talked already a lot in a previous while responding to a previous question. So, certainly that should have answered you. Bodapati, how is C++ different from C? Sorry, you have not gone through the initial modules carefully at all, because the whole of the C++ programming course that we did here started by identifying what are the things which are good in C, how those are extended in C++ in terms of a better C. These are not specifically object orientation or inheritance or kind of what should I say, polymorphism and so on, but the simple extensions like having const, having reference as a mechanism. So, these are extensions that makes it a better C, and then we have talked of what are the things that are on top of this in C++. So, the whole structure of the course talks about this. So, I think you will have to go back to the videos again and go through them more carefully, keeping this question specifically in your mind, and you will find the answer. Next one, sir, can I use this language for all purposes? Again, I think in the earlier TOB index showing slide itself, Tariq, I have answered this question. No, it depends on what you are trying to do. So, learn, if you have a requirement, if you have an application to build, then you will always please check out what is the best language for it. So, there are different aspects of efficiency, readability, safety, quality, ease of programming, several factors, portability. So, depending on all of that, what is required in your application that you are trying to develop, you will choose the language. I already talked of that. Machine learning applications are heavily being written in Python, whereas infrastructure is certainly written in C++, C and so on. GUI very often will be in Python or in Java, because there are good support. C++ have no support on GUIs, you need to use third party libraries and so on. So, the choice will be based on all those. Sir, will summer internship in 2020 be provided from NPTEL to the top performers in this course? Manish Kumar Joshi, very valid question. This is summer internship is not decided by the teachers, not the academic teachers or TAs, the academic group of the course. This is decided by the NPTEL Secretariat, so you will have to talk to them. But given the situation of uncertainty that we are in, I do not know whether at all any internship will happen in the country during this summer, because the institutions are going on mandatory break, and therefore, many of the semesters will overspill into the summer, and possibly there will be no internship at all, but check with the NPTEL. What are the dates of the online programming examination and final proctored examination? Of course, as I explained that the information is awaited. Once the situation settles a little bit, we will have better information. Want to know more about C++? Well, that is great, Dinesh. So, please Dinesh, I would request that this zeal to know more is very good, but it is important to know well. So, whatever C++ we have covered, that itself is very huge. So, I will first say that instead of knowing more, you should focus on knowing well. Practice, practice, practice. Beyond that, if you want to know more about C++, there are several extensions of C++ that has happened over the last couple of years. The most important being C++ 11, which has introduced severe set of features which are completely new. I mean, not only new to C++, they are new to almost the whole family of languages that the programming community use. Then there has been some more which has come in as C++ 14 version. There is some more which has come in as C++ 17 version. Of course, that is those sets are small. C++ 11 is the most dominant edition. So, you could look up those. There are several material available on the net. GCC's online compiler has support for C++ 11 and C++ 14. I know. C++ 17 I have not checked, you can check on those. And we have some thoughts discussions here in NPTEL that we might have a 4-week 1 credit kind of advanced C++ course coming soon, maybe next semester or next to next semester. So, we are discussing that. So, when it comes, certainly stay tuned, that will be a good place to learn more about it. Okay, that's all that we had from the previous questions, and as well as from the forum. So, now I am moving back to on to the questions that you have asked during the session. Rohan Sharma said, does return reference change the array if I send to a recursive function which returns by reference? Yes, it does, because it is returned by reference. So, it will change, and arrays even in C, which does not have direct support for or generic support for reference, actually passes arrays by reference, because passing a whole lot of things. So, it is not. So, that is yes. Mr. Ochinto Singh, you have written a code, give some output. This so okay. In the second one, it is very clear, right? You have A is 3, so it is printing that. After that, it is got incremented. Then it is giving this, because you have pre-incremented A. So, after this A is 4, there is a pre-incrementation in the expression. So, this whole thing is the expression. So, that becomes 5. So, it prints 5, and then it prints 5. In the other one, let us see, it is plus plus. So, that is something which will happen later. Then you have a pre-increment. So, this will happen first. So, you get 4 here. Once this has happened, then it gets incremented. So, you have 5, and then finally you have 5. So, that is, see, do not write this code. Please, 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 I have told several times that do not write smart code using pre and post increment operators. They are not meant for this. They are meant for a very specific purpose, significantly for the loop control increment or decrementation, or pointer advancing. The moment you write this, the difficulty is in the order in which this pre-increment will happen, this one, and the post-increment will happen. It is not only that it is very difficult for us to analyze, but it is very significantly that it may vary between compilers. if you run it with 5 compilers, these examples, it is not unlikely that one of them at least will give a different result. For the simple reason that in a multiple pre and post increments in the same expression is not specifically covered in the language specification, because that is not the use model for pre and post increment. So, please do not do that. We try to avoid asking questions of this kind, because I think this is stupid things to do, and if you are doing this, then you are doing yourself a disservice than learning the language. Use it, use a feature for the purpose for which it has been designed. Do not try to tweak that around. Kakshashan, WT is difference between what is WT? You mean what? Okay. So, please do not write WhatsApp language when you ask questions here. So, it is the difference between star A and A star percentage. So, these are basically syntax questions. So, naturally when you write it later on, then that is the syntax used in case of declaration. So, it is basically in this I will take this as a type. So, A is a type, you are defining a pointer for that. When you write this, I will read that this is a variable which is of pointer type, and you are dereferencing it. Similarly, when you write this, I will take that A is a variable and you are taking address for that, and when you write this, I will take that you are making a reference to A. So, if you take things out of context, then it is a language. So, you cannot take just that out of context, a part out of context, and try to understand. So, please do not do that. It's all has a syntax. So, take it in that syntax, and the meaning is clear in the way the syntax is built, right. But this is broadly what. So, you use here to dereference, use this to define a pointer, declare a pointer, use this to take the address of, and use this to define a reference of a particular. So, this and this are of similar nature. I am sorry, this and this is a pointer, this is a pointer, this is dereferencing, and this is taking address of. So, why is C more popular than C++ in TOB index? It's to be expected, because C has been around for ages. So, there is a whole lot of code in C. The embedded system community, there is a whole lot of programming is done in embedded systems where you need a lightweight language and you need efficiency. So, C fits into that model very well. So, C++ actually in the new generations of C++, attention has been given so that you can also have a lightweight, you can write it in a lightweight manner, but that will take more time for people to learn. The other reason it is popular is it is taught more widely in colleges. So, naturally more programmers are used to it. So, when they become professionals, if they need to use the C family, they fall on to C, and once they do that, and once a project has built up 100,000 lines of C, it is not easy to take it to C++. So, you keep on building the next 20,000 lines in C itself. So, it has been always like that. Rishikesh Joshi again, sir, please talk about competitive programming and how to move ahead with C++. I think I have already answered this. Competitive programming, we are teaching a course to learn the language and programming in that language. Competitive programming is not in the domain of this course. So, that you have to figure out. There is ACM, ICPC, and a whole lot of competitions you can go and compete there, but that is providing information for that is not in the scope of this course. To move ahead with C++, I have already told you have to practice and do a lot of programming in that. Look at, and one thing very important, Rishikesh and everybody, is please also try to read a lot of code. I mean, there are really good, like in GitHub you have good projects. There are other sites like Stack Overflow and so on, Gigs for Gigs, where mostly you have very nice C++ codes given. So, please read those. How did you learn the language? Say, how did you learn English? So, probably for most of you, English is not the mother tongue. You did not learn it at home, playing with your parents or your siblings. You learnt it by reading about that language, and then the core of learning the language was reading what others have written. Reading stories, reading newspaper, reading reports and so on. So, more you read, you learn the language. Please try to do the same thing when you learn programming. It is not in programming you are thinking that I learn a language and write a nice program. Does not happen, because you need to know how to write. How to write is different from knowing the language. You know every grammar of English, but you may still not be a very good writer in English unless you have read a lot of people. So, you cannot be a very good C++ programmer unless you have read a lot of good programs. So, nowadays it is so easy to get access to good programs. There are very good sites, even the core programs like core systems like Boost and all that are open source. So, you can just open and see how people have done different things, learn from there, use that, and that is how you will be able to move ahead, Rishikesh, in your search for becoming a better C++ developer. Well, is there anything else, Himadri? Shoman? No? So, it seems that well we are done for this live session exercise. We have tried to answer all the questions that were given that came to us. So, it is really nice to know that you all are making progress, you all are going with this, and again we are going through a difficult time. So, possibly most of you do not have respective colleges and so on. So, it is make use of that. Do not consider this off as a vacation, but use that more for doing practice, doing these courses which are available in online, not only C++ but others as well, and prepare well. I know it is a little bit uncertainty does cause certain difficulties, because you do not know when the examination is going to happen, but this is natural realities, nobody can help. So, keep preparing, keep progressing, and keep writing onto the forum. If you have questions, we will try to answer those, and all the best for your proctored as well as unproctored examination. Take them well and do well. Thank you.